Sunday morning in July, a man armed with a 12-gauge shotgun burst into this church in Knoxville, Tennessee, and opened fire. Seconds later, one person lay dead, another mortally wounded, and 6 injured.
The man who walked into this sanctuary on July 27th was armed with a gun, but he was also armed with hatred. He was armed with bitterness. He was armed with resentments. He was armed with indiscriminate anger. He was armed in body and spirit.
Members of the congregation wrestled a 58-year-old unemployed truck driver named Jim David Adkison to the floor and held him until police came. At first, it seemed like just another inexplicable outburst of violence, until a police news conference the next day.
It appears that what brought him to this horrible event was his lack of being able to obtain a job, his frustration over that, and his stated hatred for the liberal movement.
Why did Adkison hate the liberal movement? Police said that he told them that all liberals should be killed because they were ruining the country, and that he felt that the Democrats had tied his country's hands in the war on terror and ruined every institution in America. Police said that Adkison had targeted the Unitarian Universalist Church because of its liberal teachings. The church advocates social justice and tolerance, and it openly welcomes gay, lesbian, and transgendered members. According to police, Adkison said that because he could not get to the leaders of the liberal movement, that he would target those that had voted them into office.
Liberalism is in essence the HIV virus, and it weakens the defense cells of a nation. What are the defense cells of a nation? Well, the church. They've attacked particularly the Catholic Church for 30 straight years. The police, attacked for the last 50 straight years by the ACLU viruses. And the military, attacked for the last 50 years by the Barbara Boxer viruses.
And earlier this year on his radio show, he targeted kids with autism.
I'll tell you what autism is in 99% of the cases. It's a brat who hasn't been told to cut the act out. That's what autism is. What do you mean they scream and they're silent? They don't have a father around to tell them, don't act like a moron, you'll get nowhere in life. Stop acting like a putz. Straighten up, act like a man. Don't sit there crying and screaming, idiot.
Fire Savage now!
That outburst prompted protests by outraged parents, and a few stations dropped Savage's show. So did an advertiser. But Savage hasn't apologized, and he's still on the air.
America's being overrun by an invasion force from Mexico that'll soon take over the country. You psychotic liberals don't even know you're digging your own grave and throwing lime in there. All it's missing is the worm from the tequila bottle to go with it.
Michael Savage isn't the only right-wing talk radio host who launches blistering, even violent verbal attacks on people and groups he doesn't like. Glenn Beck, for instance, fantasized about murdering a liberal filmmaker.
I'm thinking about killing Michael Moore, and I'm wondering if I could kill him myself or if I would need to hire somebody to do it. I think I could. I think he could be looking me in the eye, and I could just be choking the life out. Is this wrong?
Michael Reagan, son of the former president, suggested that people who claim that 9/11 was an inside job, a U.S. government conspiracy, deserve to die.
Take them out and shoot them. They are traitors to this country, and shoot them. But anybody who would do that doesn't deserve to live. You shoot them. You call them traitors, that's what they are, and you shoot them dead.
Millions of Americans tune into right-wing talk radio every day. Last year's debate over the immigration reform bill became a case study for Rory O'Connor. As arguments went back and forth, some of the language turned venomous. Hosts amped up their audience's outrage with attacks on the bill's supporters and verbal assaults on immigrants.
I already have received at least one brilliant email today about the immigration problem. This person sent me an email, said, when we defeat this illegal alien amnesty bill and when we yank out the welcome mat and they all start going back to Mexico, as a going-away gift, let's all give them a little box of nuclear waste. Tell them it'll heat tortillas.
But do you understand what the New York Times wants and the far left want? They want to break down the white Christian male power structure, of which you're a part, and so am I, and they want to bring in millions of foreign nationals to basically break down the structure that we have.
O'Connor says the result stunned Washington.
There were massive numbers of emails and letters and phone calls. You know, senators said they had to have 2 or 3 people in their office answering the calls. That was all that they could do. They were inundated. And beyond that, how do you get their attention? Well, I tell you, if you send a threatening letter to a senator's home, that gets his attention pretty fast.
Florida Republican Senator Mel Martinez got a threatening letter at home. North Carolina Republican Richard Burr got a threatening call at his office. South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham told the New York Times that he and others had received threats too. The Times also reported that a mass email opposing the bill suggested that its supporters needed to be taken out by any means. The bipartisan support collapsed. The bill died, and right-wing talk radio hosts took credit.
This is evidence of their vast power. I mean, President George Bush was pulling out all his political capital to get immigration reform passed. Trent Lott was backing him up with everything he had. And guess what? The president and the Republican leadership and Harry Reid and the Democratic leadership, they all lost. And they lost to a bunch of radio jocks.
Right-wing talk radio hosts usually reserve their ad hominem attacks for liberal figures. Jim Quinn has his own name for the National Organization for Women.
The National Organization for Whores. They're whores for liberal politics in general, and they were whores for Bill Clinton in particular.
Glenn Beck tried to connect former Vice President Al Gore's efforts against global warming with Nazism.
Well, it was the first thing they did to get people to exterminate the Jews. Now, I'm not saying that anybody's going to, Al Gore's not going to be rounding up Jews and exterminating them. It is the same tactic, however. You got to have an enemy to fight. And when you have an enemy to fight, then you can unite the entire world behind you and you seize power. That was Hitler's plan. His enemy, the Jew. Al Gore's enemy, the UN's enemy, global warming.
During this year's Democratic primaries, Rush Limbaugh urged his listeners to vote for Senator Hillary Clinton to foster division in the Democratic Party, in the hope that that would lead to violence in the streets of Denver. He called it Operation Chaos.
This is about chaos. This is why it's called Operation Chaos. The dream end. I mean, if people say, what's your exit strategy? The dream end of this is that this keeps up to the convention. And that we have a replay of Chicago 1968 with burning cars, protests, fires, literal riots, and all of that. That's the objective.
Blame all your problems on some minority group, then everyone else is exonerated. We exonerate ourselves. We don't have to look at ourselves to see what sort of ways we contribute to the problems of the world. We don't have to examine ourselves to see what we're doing that is helping to create the problems that we're so concerned about.
In other words, Bice says, angry talk radio rhetoric simply sets up scapegoats for society's problems. And ever since Jim David Adkison walked into his church and opened fire, he can't help but wonder whether that might lead to more violence.